It's within everybody's common understanding that, if you don't have a toothbrush, if you don't have soap, if you don't have a blanket, it's not safe and sanitary. Well, wouldn't everybody agree to that? Do you agree to that?
The Justice Department under Donald Trump is fighting the Flores Amendment aggressively. Now, the Flores Amendment has certain protections for migrant children who are detained at the border. Now, back in 2017, following Trump's zero tolerance policy of separating children at the border, a judge ruled that the children needed to be reunited with their parents and made sure to mention that the Flores Amendment indicates, or the Flores Settlement indicates, that they can't just detain children indefinitely. Now, the Trump administration is fighting this, and one of their DOJ lawyers, her name is Sarah Fabian, spoke in front of federal judges to make her case. And in the middle of this long hearing, there was a portion dedicated to the squalor that these children are living in. And so let me give you a little taste of what that looked like.
The testimony that the district judge believed was, it's really cold. In fact, it gets colder when we complain about it being cold. We're supposed to sleep crowded with the lights on all night long. And all you do put us on is the concrete floor with an aluminum blanket. I mean, I understand at some outer boundary there may be some definitional difficulty, but no one would argue that this is secure and sanitary, safe and sanitary. Or at least I don't think you're arguing that, are you?
Your Honor, I think what I'm arguing is that the way that the district court reached the conclusion was to say these specific items, and I think I will acknowledge, I think sleep is the more difficult end of what I'm arguing.
We actually have an opinion that says that it's unconstitutional to make homeless people not sleep, right? So.
Correct, Your Honor, and I think, I do know, and I think that's part of our point, though, is that we're not talking about the constitutional standard here, and we're not talking about what CBP has implemented more broadly as its own TEDS policy. We're talking about. Are
you arguing seriously that you do not read the agreement as requiring you to do something other than what I've just described? Cold all night long, lights on all night long, sleep on the concrete, and you get an aluminum foil blanket. Are you saying that that's okay?
And too crowded to lie down, which they also said.
I find that inconceivable that the government would say that that is safe and sanitary.
So this government would find it very conceivable.
Yeah, so what's interesting is in this case, you have this DOJ lawyer arguing that the Flores settlement does not indicate that they need to provide soap, toothpaste, the tools and the products necessary for sanitary conditions. In fact, she goes even further than that, which we'll see in the next video. But Cenk, do you want to jump in before we do that?
So I love that part where she was like, well, sleep is on the harder end of what I'm arguing for. Meaning, yeah, it's pretty hard to argue that they shouldn't get sleep when this condition is safe and sanitary. And so even she knows her case is absurd. The main thing she's relying on is, I don't know, it's kind of vague, which by the way is what lawyers always rely on when arguing bills. They say, well, they said safe and sanitary, but what does that mean? What does sanitary really mean? And that is why the judges are drilling down here and going, are you saying that there's a way to be sanitary without soap? Are you saying there's a way to be sanitary without toothpaste? And so they have to ask these absurd questions. So look, some of these conditions existed under Obama, but here Trump is proud of this and is now defending it and has appealed the 2017 case, going, no, I like these conditions and I want to keep it going.
Actually, so while one could argue that the Obama administration had its faults, right? Part of the issue under the Obama administration is you had unaccompanied minors coming into the country, and he had to deal with it, right? And I'm not giving him a pass. We were very critical of the way Obama handled immigration back then. But the point I want to make, and this is a distinction that I never see in the media, and it drives me crazy, is that Trump has created this problem. He has exacerbated it. And part of the way that he does that is by pushing for punitive action against any and all undocumented immigrants. So previously, if you have unaccompanied minors coming into the country seeking asylum, well, then you can look for sponsors, people in the country who could take in the children and watch them until a judge can hear them out in their asylum case. But what Trump has done is so punitive that a lot of these individuals, many of whom are not documented themselves, are unwilling to come forward and take custody of the children temporarily. So he has made a bad problem much worse. But with that said, let's hear more from Sarah Fabian.
It's within everybody's common understanding that, if you don't have a toothbrush, if you don't have soap, if you don't have a blanket, it's not safe and sanitary. Well, wouldn't everybody agree to that? Do you agree to that?
Well, I think there's fair reason to find that those things may be part of safe and sanitary.
Maybe are a part. What do you say maybe? You mean there are circumstances when a person doesn't need to have a toothbrush, toothpaste, and soap for days?
Well, I think in CBP custody, it's frequently intended to be much shorter term. So it may be that for a shorter term stay in CBP custody, that some of those things may not be required.
Yeah, but I don't think that was the situation that the court was confronting. I mean, it wasn't as though those people were there for 12 hours and then moved on to the Hilton Hotel. No, they were there for a fairly sustained period. And at least according to the evidence that the judge believed, they weren't getting these things for a fairly sustained period.
So just to give you some more context, the conditions were so horrendous that reporting indicated some children didn't have diaper changes for days. They were in the clothing that they were originally in when they showed up to the border. There was no room to sleep. Many of them were unable to sleep because there was literally no bed provided. They were in crowded facilities. One of the reporters referred to the children as having, snot all over their faces. They were filthy. The stench was, unbearable. I mean, the conditions they were living in were clearly not sanitary, unsanitary. And you have this lawyer arguing as if she has no common sense, as if the federal government has no common sense as to what is or is not considered sanitary.
Yeah, so I know the Trump administration is appealing the 2017 ruling. So that's what they're relying on to not fix the conditions at all, saying, well, we haven't got a final decision on this. It hasn't gone all the way to the Supreme Court. But normally what should happen is when a court makes a ruling, the executive branch should then enforce that ruling, and even while appealing. But here, Trump not only has not addressed what the court originally said, which is you cannot keep kids under this condition. It's against the law, okay, from the party of rule of law, right? Mm-hmm. But remember, Trump also said you shouldn't cooperate with law enforcement and never work with the FBI. He's proud to have never worked with the FBI. So I guess they don't care about the rule of law at all. But then on top of that, to Anna's point, he's packed in so many more kids into these areas. So not only is it unsanitary and continues to be after all these years, but now people are dying and kids are dying. So at least 6 children have died since September. And is it partly related to the unsanitary conditions? Yes. So a 16-year-old boy from Guatemala died after he got the flu in an overcrowded facility. And there was a quarantine of 32 migrants who were diagnosed with the flu in that facility alone. Now, this is how disease spreads. And then what will the Trump people do? They'll then turn around and have Tucker Carlson go on TV and say, you see that? They're dirty and they're making the country dirtier. No, you are keeping them locked up, a lot of times in cages, in unsanitary conditions. That is where the problem is arising from. I'm not saying that they came into the country crossing the desert in pristine condition, but our job is to maintain a minimum standard of safe and sanitary. And we're clearly failing that. I say 6 kids, 24 people have died overall already in those facilities.
Exactly, and rather than really focusing on what the Trump administration is doing, how many people have died, the media gets distracted by this nonsense debate about whether or not you can consider, those facilities concentration camps. They're concentration camps. There's no need for debate. Let's move on because this is what's really going on at the border.
Yeah, and they're not death camps. That's a different term. Concentration camps is when you concentrate a lot of people in an area like this when they should not be held by the government.
Right.
And that is exactly what we're doing, and it is leading to these effects. So we need to address it. And I gotta say though, look, the original case came out of the Obama administration. So a lot of the establishment media didn't cover things under Obama and Bush. Now, since Trump is a well-known monster, they're covering some of these stories more. And Trump has made this situation considerably worse in all the ways that we just explained. But I wish they were covering it under Obama as well.
Yeah,
and I think
definitely.
the establishment politicians get way too much of a pass for all the monstrous things that have happened under their watch. I don't mean to put monstrous label on Obama, but he did a lot of bad things that we talked about, including the drone strikes on civilians, etc. And now people are arguing that Bush was a good president compared to Trump. No, Bush started the Iraq War. It killed nearly 1 million innocent civilians.
I mean, if Bush were president today, we would be in Iran right now. I mean,
certainly if he was still under the influence of Cheney.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
for sure. And the guys that were influencing were guys like John Bolton. And look at that, he's back in charge. So I like that Trump is being held accountable. I hope that if and when Trump leaves, that continues for the next president, even if they're part of the establishment.
There's one other thing that I want to mention quickly about Sarah Fabian. Now again, she's the DOJ lawyer in the videos that we showed you. And there's been a petition going around trying to get her disbarred. And at first I was a little hesitant about the anger and the rage toward her. Yes, she's making ridiculous arguments on behalf of the Trump administration, but that's what lawyers do. Lawyers sometimes represent hideous people. And so I didn't know how I felt about that until I did a little more digging on Sarah Fabian, and I found out that when a federal judge indicated that children needed to be reunified with their parents, she argued that she couldn't work on that during the weekend because she had to do some dog sitting. Yeah, I have dog sitting responsibilities that require me to go back to Colorado, but I will be back Monday.
I wonder if the kids in cages got dog sitters as well. Probably not.